Chapter 4. On this occasion, a man of great research in natural philosophy was with us, and he entered on the explanation of a theory which he had formed on the subject of electricity and galvanism. Inside the ballroom, the air felt as though ice crystals were suspended within it. A quick glance revealed all the windows had been opened. The ballroom was also unlit. Caroline shivered as she accepted her husband's hand in the shadowy room. Her excitement surprised her. Once the Frankensteins and their guests were inside, a bevy of servants shut the ballroom doors and windows with a snap. The room turned pitch black. Caroline's excitement shifted. "Oh, for a single candle," she fretted, her fingers searching for the edge of the door. Unable to see, every sound grated. Giddy chatter rising and falling, the shuffle of feet as people settled. She struggled to find an anchor in her disorientation, something besides the doorframe. There was Elizabeth with her nervous giggle, Henry's mild scent of trade and ink, Victor clutching a purloined glass of claret, judging by the scent of fermented fruit. "We're all inside, yes?" Alphonse sounded from the other side of the ballroom. "We'll begin. I've invited you here to witness a miracle." "A Christmas miracle," a woman's voice scoffed. Madame Tavernier, who'd been staring at the oil portrait earlier. Caroline's mouth tightened. "A miracle at any time," Alphonse clarified. "A miracle my guest, Dr. Galvani, a natural philosopher from Bologna, will reveal." Caroline awaited a rush of chatter or applause. Silence. Perhaps their guests were as uneasy as she felt. "Dr. Galvani," Alphonse prompted, "you are ready to commence?" "I am, Signore Frankenstein." A match hissed, the scent of sulphur. A candle offering scarce illumination to a man's face. Dr. Galvani's face. He emerged from the darkness as uncanny as a ghost. Caroline's stomach gave another odd flip. Dr. Galvani called out, "Your guests can all see me, yes?" A rush of assent. Dr. Galvani's tone was forceful. "I apologize for the cold air, but it is necessary for reasons I will later explain. I beg your patience as I reveal newly discovered wonders, which will bring us closer to the source of all that animates life." He clapped briskly. "If you will, clear the center of the ballroom. Against the walls, if you please." A rustle of skirts and heels, laughter. "Ouch, you stepped on my foot." Apologies. Caroline shivered anew. She sensed Alphonse beside her. Yes, that was the camphor liniment he used for his stiff neck. "Are you frightened, my dear?" he asked. An unexpected ripple rose along her spine. "Should I be?" "Watch. Whatever happens, don't shut your eyes." Dr. Galvani's voice boomed. "Signore e signori, are you ready?" A chorus of impatient, excited applause. Caroline recognized Elizabeth's bell-like giggle in the mix. "Bravo," Dr. Galvani called. "3 rules before we start. Primo, do not look away from the center of the room. Secondo, do not move no matter what you might behold. Terzo, remain silent and calm." He blew out his candle. "Ecco, let us begin." Devoid of that single candle, the ballroom seemed as dark as Hades. Caroline resisted the urge to flee. After what felt like the longest moment, her ears made out a soft metallic click. The door that led to the garden. Had someone entered? Her throat grew tight. A shifting, slippery sound, soft footsteps on the marble floor from the center of the ballroom. This must be why Dr. Galvani had insisted on their vacating it. And then, just as unexpectedly, a pinprick of light. A spark. Flurries of sparks. They twinkled like stars in the middle of the ballroom, each about 3 feet above the floor. No, higher. The stars appeared as Caroline imagined the sky must have shone the night of her Saviour's birth. Her mouth spread into an unforced smile. How magical the stars appeared, the sparks rising and falling. They were accompanied by a soft sizzle that snapped and popped. Amid the sparks of light, she made out the silhouettes of legs, each pressing against the others as they danced. Men, or were they women, adorned in breeches and stockings, their arms waving with unexpected grace in circle patterns. They must have been wearing slippers, for their steps made nary a sound. More sparks. The audience gasped, a chorus of oohs. Caroline's hands relaxed. Yes, it was good. All was good. Whatever Dr. Galvani was presenting, it was a miracle, as Alphonse had promised. Her eyes watered. Was it from squinting into the dark, or emotion? No matter. Dr. Galvani's display had been beautiful, and beauty was required these troubled days. She understood this now. The stars dazzled, circled in a celestial display, and then just as suddenly they faded from whence they came. Ecco là! Light returned in a blaze of candles. Caroline blinked, eyes stinging. Once her sight adjusted, she made out the silhouettes of 6 men, all adorned in stark ebony from their toes to their fingertips. They wore black breeches above black silk tights with matching slippers and gloves to blend in with the night. Each of them held a lit brass candelabra, as though God himself had declared, "Let there be light." "Electricity!" Dr. Galvani proclaimed with a bow. "Bravo!" Caroline beat her palms together until they burned, her face aching with joy. Others joined her applause, along with a soft, "Brilliant," from Henry. "Brilliant indeed," she heard Alphonse murmur, his tone lighter than she'd witnessed in months. "Victor, what think you?" No answer came. Where was Victor? Caroline glanced about the ballroom. There was Elizabeth, Henry. At last she found Victor on the other side of the door from her. His arms were folded against his chest, his face long. "Darling?" She nodded toward Victor. Alphonse waved away her concern. "Look." He pointed toward Dr. Galvani, who'd returned to the center of the ballroom. What was next? Caroline found herself eager to find out. She forgot about Victor. Such wonders and marvels, she'd never forget them. "The demonstration of static electricity you've just witnessed," Dr. Galvani explained, "was created by rubbing silk in a dry, cold environment, hence the open windows. The friction creates negative and positive charges. But this is but a fraction of what electricity can accomplish. Sir Isaac Newton is said to have avowed that he felt like a child picking up shells beside the great and unexplored ocean of truth. Thus is how it is for me. Good people, though I have devoted much of my life in an attempt to unveil the face of nature, her immortal lineaments remain a wonder and a mystery." A shrug. "Still, one tries. I am encouraged by the writings of other natural philosophers such as Signore Priestley of London, with his History and Present State of Electricity, Signore Marat's recent Memoire sur l'électricité médicale." "What about Cornelius Agrippa? Paracelsus?" Victor's voice rang out. Dr. Galvani smiled. "Ah, young Signore Frankenstein, I am honored by your interest. I would prefer not to discuss Agrippa or Paracelsus. Alchemy is not the focus of my display." Alchemy? Hadn't that to do with transforming lead into gold? Caroline remembered an old tale her father had told her before his death, one he believed as truth. Dr. Galvani continued speaking, but she was distracted. She glanced over at Victor. His mouth was pursed, arms still crossed. Why is he so disapproving? Once Dr. Galvani finished, Caroline recalled him explaining electrostatic generators, a Dr. Nollet as inventor. His assistants rolled out a waist-high cart holding the square-shaped contraption. A hollow glass globe rested in the center of it, an immense hand crank on one side. The cart's wooden wheels clattered like a peddler's wagon against the marble floor. At the doctor's command, Everyone in the room, even her servants, circled the electrostatic generator to hold hands tightly. On Caroline's left, Alphonse. On her right, Elizabeth. Her ward's palms were moist. Caroline looked over her shoulder. There was Victor beside Elizabeth, then Henry with his father, who yawned. Across the circle, Justine, who appeared more blanched of colour than usual. Sophie with her bright red hair. Dr. Galvani ordered, "Whatever you do, do not release your neighbour's hand. Trust in the mystery of nature as the electrical fluid is passed from source to end and back again." As Dr. Galvani turned the crank of the electrostatic generator, the glass globe glowed with a blue light. Mercury. A sharp ting sizzled through Caroline's palms, passing from Alphonse to Elizabeth and around again. Smoke filled the air, a charge thick as cotton. Caroline was riveted. Nature herself was among them. Nature who possessed unfathomable wisdom. Nature who'd let Christmas arrive on the longest night of the year. "Elizabeth," she said, raising her chin, "your hair!" Elizabeth's golden hair floated in the air, cracking with light. It enveloped her face like a halo, reminding Caroline of an experience she had as a young woman when she'd viewed a lightning storm atop a mountain. She'd watched in wonder, stunned by its celestial power. Caroline felt her mouth widen. Joy, that's what she felt. But not all felt such. A scream rang out, another. "It's fine. You're safe," Caroline reassured Elizabeth. "It's not me, Aunt." Elizabeth let go of Caroline's hand and pointed across the ballroom. "Look!" Justine had broken from the circle, releasing Sophie's hand. She stood alone, a pale figure staring at the ballroom windows. Another scream, the sound of shattering glass. The window smashed. Now Sophie shrieked. The remainder of the circle scattered in a clatter of rushing limbs and shouts. Caroline resisted the urge to scream herself. "The golem!" Justine shouted. "It's here!" Someone tall and dark staggered into the ballroom from the garden, someone hulking and gasping. Glass crunched beneath his footfall. His arms were full as he approached Caroline. Was he holding a basket? Justine screamed again. "The golem!" "Back!" Alphonse ordered. He pulled out what appeared to be a pistol. Where had it come from? The intruder's silhouette grew close enough that Caroline made out the sallow gleam of his eye. "My children!" she wanted to shout, but no words came. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Henry push Elizabeth from the intruder's path and Victor reaching for Elizabeth, shouting. "They're protecting her, but I must protect them." Caroline set her body before Elizabeth, Victor, and Henry, her knees buckling. She collapsed to the marble floor, breath knocked from her lungs. Her body arched. A charge flowed into her spine, from her heels to her forehead. Dr. Galvani, the electrostatic generator. It still whirled, still glowed. Somehow Caroline had brushed against it in her attempt to protect Elizabeth and Victor. She managed to break away. "Victor? Elizabeth? Where are you?" "Behind you, Mother." Before Caroline could turn, a flurry of papers assaulted her face, edges sharp against her cheeks. Pamphlets, dozens of them, 100. They scattered across the floor. The pages flipped open, legible despite the scant light. A forest of woodcuts depicting a chorus of unclothed Marie Antoinettes. Men, women, animals, genitals, breasts, limbs, taunting and depraved. The intruder stepped forward, blocking Caroline's view of the pamphlets. He was daring her to move, daring her to leave. Well, he'd have to kill her before she'd let him hurt her children. He was tall, foreboding. His mouth cracked open, a corner raised, lips shifting. "Hate you," he appeared to be saying. Or was it, "Help me"? Was he wearing a red jacket? Yes, he was. Screams, but not her own. Another surge ringing through her veins. panic, not electricity. Caroline looked down. Blood on the floor. Blood on the intruder's hands. Wet, sticky. The intruder's hands stretched toward Caroline, but she couldn't turn away. How sorrowful his eyes appeared! A compassion rose, surprising her. "Madame!" Justine shouted, throwing herself between Caroline and the intruder. A spark of light. A blast. Smoke. When the smoke cleared, the body of a tall, raven-haired man dressed in a red uniform lay on the ballroom floor, a pistol beside him. A Swiss soldier. "He's dead," Alphonse confirmed. "But not from gunshot." Chapter 5. When I look back, it seems to me as if this almost miraculous change of inclination and will was the immediate suggestion of the guardian angel of my life, the last effort made by the spirit of preservation to avert the storm that was even then hanging in the stars. Outside the Frankenstein's Maison de Campagne, a line of coaches departed for Geneva, their lanterns hanging like stars in the night. These coaches transported all of the Frankenstein's guests, including Dr. Galvani with his electrostatic generator. The lifeless body of the intruder had been dragged into the garden shed, where the new gravedigger would collect him come morning. The pamphlets had been gathered and burned, judging by the weight of smoke in the air. Caroline observed all this with a peculiar detachment. How much time had passed since Alphonse's Christmas soiree staggered to a halt? An hour? More? She couldn't be certain. Time seemed twisted, strange. She glanced toward the lake, toward the horizon. The sky remained ink-dark, but she sensed dawn would arrive soon. Victor and Elizabeth stood behind her. They were safe. Beside her, Alphonse clutched her hand. He stroked it with his thumb. "Are you listening, my dear?" He'd been a Swiss soldier, he repeated in a soothing tone. "A mercenary. A revolutionary, probably, on his way from Geneva to God knows where. He'd collapsed before I discharged the pistol." Victor remarked, "Just think. He was alive this morning, went through his day, and now he's dead." Caroline shivered, but not from cold as she had in the ballroom. She watched Elizabeth and Victor drift away. They appeared headed for the garden. "Don't go into the shed," she wanted to shout. She didn't. They should go to bed. She should go to bed. She couldn't, not yet. She inhaled deeply. The air smelled moist, dangerous. Everything was dangerous. It hadn't mattered they'd left Geneva for this house 1 league east in Bellerive. It hadn't mattered she'd been vigilant. 1, 2, 3... Yet again Marie Antoinette's half-clad torso rushed behind Caroline's eyelids. Those pamphlets! Everyone had seen them, though no one said anything. They were frightened, as she'd been. But she'd protected her children. She'd done what was necessary. Afterward, Victor had embraced her, muttering how afraid he'd been to lose his mother. "Caroline, did you hear me?" I'm listening, Alphonse," she replied. "A man died in our ballroom. A soldier, a Swiss revolutionary. The gravedigger will gather him in the morning." He pulled her close against him, his heart a steady rhythm. "He was already dying when he burst through the window. Someone must have knifed him days earlier. His chest had savage wounds which were green with pus. Frankly, it's a miracle he didn't expire earlier. He'd taken shelter in our greenhouse. There's bloodstains on the floor, a knapsack. He probably planned to leave once he felt hale." What had Victor said? He was alive that morning, went through his day. Alphonse continued, still clutching her hand. "When he didn't improve, he grew desperate for help. That's why he interrupted the soiree. He'd heard people, noticed the candlelight." Caroline struggled to comprehend. Alphonse's individual words, yes, she understood. But the compilation of these words into thoughts, it was too much. Her knees felt wobbly. When she shut her eyes to calm herself, all she saw was the soldier's eyes when they met hers. She'd felt a strange kinship with him she couldn't explain. An affinity. But that wasn't all Caroline felt. An unexpected joy rose from the core of her body, similar to the one she'd felt during Galvani's celestial display. Was it that she survived what she'd most feared? Or something else? "She protected me," Caroline said, "as I hoped." Alphonse's thumb paused on her hand. "Who protected you?" "Justine, the new maid. She threw herself before the soldier after he broke the window. All to protect us." Another realization, one that brought a hope into Caroline's heart brighter than Dr. Galvani's display. "Justine mentioned she'd seen the soldier the night we found her. She spoke of someone chasing her into our garden, a monster, a golem, whatever that is. She said it was a story her father told." "A golem?" Alphonse offered a reluctant smile. "My dear, I have a confession to make. It was due to Justine that this entertainment, if you will, took place." "Justine invited Dr. Galvani?" How could this be? "No, but she reminded me of him. I met Dr. Galvani last week in Geneva at the assembly. I'd forgotten about him until 2 days ago when I startled Justine in Victor's room looking at his books. At first she was distressed, for she feared I'd send her back to her mother. I finally teased out the truth. You wanted her to pay mind to anything unusual." "Whatever you want of me, I shall do." Somehow Justine had sensed Caroline's needs, her worries, even before Caroline asked her to spy. Caroline replied, "What was in his books?" Alphonse shrugged. "She can't read, so she couldn't say. She said the pictures alarmed her. But I understood what the books contained. Cornelius Agrippa, Paracelsus, Albertus Magnus." He shook his head. "Alchemy. Fantastical rubbish to rot his mind." The cold air transformed while he spoke. Sharp breezes, clouds gathering. The shift in weather mirrored the passion of Alphonse's words. He continued, "I noticed Victor was secretive and behaving strangely. I questioned him. He remained tight-lipped. Caroline, I've been a poor father." "You? Never." Across the lake, a slash of lightning over the Juras, too far away to affect them. "Listen and judge, Caroline. Last summer, when we visited the baths in Tonon, that day we were rained out at the inn, he'd shown me the Agrippa, which he'd found in the library there. I'd laughed and said, 'Cornelius Agrippa, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash.'" "How did Victor respond?" "He didn't. But to be fair, I didn't say why it was trash. I was distracted, for I'd received a letter from Ernest's doctor that morning. Perhaps if I had, Victor wouldn't have read the other books." Another flash of lightning, this one closer. "If I'd been a good father, I would have explained the principles of Agrippa have been entirely exploded and that a more modern system of science has been introduced. I would have arranged for him to have a tutor or go to school." Alphonse's tone turned gentle. "But I feared upsetting you after sending Ernest away." Ernest, away. The words dangled between them. "And so, when Justine showed you those books in his room," Caroline said at last, "you invited Dr. Galvani here to educate Victor." Now the entire evening made sense. Alphonse hung his head. "I worried if I said anything critical of the Agrippa, I'd make it worse. Victor is so passionate, so independent of thought, he should rarely be in school. But I would have never known about his interest in alchemy unless Justine had found those books. She's loyal." Caroline squeezed her husband's hand, wrinkled beside her smooth one. "I should have confided in you that I asked her to pay attention to anything irregular. I ought to ask your forgiveness." "There is nothing to forgive." He pressed his lips against her cheek, his grey eyes gleaming in the dark. "You, Caroline Beaufort Frankenstein, are ever perfect in my eyes, ever lovely. Exactly as when I first met you all those years ago at your father's side." His voice broke. "I know I am much older than you. I know I could not have been your first choice for a husband." "That's not true," she protested. Though it was. The truth was she'd had no choice. Not really, unless you considered a life plaiting straw for hats a choice. Anyway, no woman's life was her own. She'd known this for as long as she could recall. Nor was she the first girl to wed for security over affection. All these years later, her prosperity still felt so undeserved, especially once she learned Alphonse had married her out of love, not pity over her father. "You have been a good husband, Alphonse," she said, eyes stinging. "A good father. A good man. You are good." With this declaration, Caroline allowed her hands to settle as though she'd been relieved of a burden too heavy to bear. No tapping, no counting. She stroked Alphonse's white beard. It had been grey when they'd first met. Alphonse had been true all these years. He'd loved her when they'd wed, even if she hadn't loved him then as she should. Sensing her softening, Alphonse reached for Caroline as though to breach the years between them. He kissed her gently, tentatively, but it was a true kiss nonetheless. He pulled away, awaiting her reaction. His breath warm upon her cheeks, his skin scented with tobacco and wine and, yes, gunpowder. Despite her turning him away for so long, he still loved her. This felt more of a Christmas miracle than Dr. Galvani's display that evening. All their troubles dissolved, the loss of infants, the illness of their younger son, the difficulties of their eldest, the hopes they held for their ward, until all that remained was her vast white bed, which awaited them upstairs in her tower room. 1 house, 4 beds, an hour before dawn. In Caroline's bed, her husband slept soundly beside her for the first time in 6 years. She smiled in the dark. How warm Alphonse had been, how gentle. She hadn't protested when he'd blown out the candle she always slept with. Then he'd embraced her, setting her adrift in her bed, but not alone. They could be alone together, couldn't they? Wasn't that what marriage was? It was joining forces against an unpredictable world, even when this world included wounded soldiers and revolutionary pamphlets and natural philosophers and troubled sons and alchemy books. Love is a form of alchemy, she thought. She smiled in the darkness, hands flat against her counterpane. There's much more to this world than I am comfortable considering. But I am safe. I am loved. Nor was she alone. She had Alphonse, Victor, Elizabeth, and now Justine, who'd proven her worth that night. And what of Justine? Was the girl resting comfortably? With all the turmoil, Caroline had never checked on her. Had she been injured when she'd thrown her body before Caroline's? Was she distressed? Caroline would speak to her in the morning. Perhaps she'd offer the girl an education now that she knew Justine was illiterate. After all, the Frankenstein household wasn't like those in England or France. They treated their servants as their equals. She'd raise the girl above her station, win her devotion, which was of greater value than loyalty. Heart at ease, Caroline watched Alphonse's eyelids tremble as he slept. He was dreaming. Soon she would, too. She set a kiss against his bristled jaw and shut her eyes. A refreshing slumber overtook her, one that led her to pay no mind to the flash of lightning where cold air met warm. For once, a storm would not disturb her. However, a flash of lightning awakened Sophie upstairs in her bed. The girl's eyes shot open. Beside her, Justine snored softly, arms relaxed across her pillow. How could she sleep after everything that night, as though a man had not died before their eyes, a man who'd appeared so tall and scary? "You're brave," Sophie whispered. "I hadn't expected that." With this, she returned to sleep, unaware that both Victor and Elizabeth's beds were empty, for they'd remained in the garden after Caroline and Alphonse had gone inside. Lightning or no, Victor paced before Elizabeth, his jacket unbuttoned. It had turned strangely warm for December. The shed holding the intruder's corpse was but a few yards away. "Just think, that soldier was here this morning, went through his day, and now he's dead," he said yet again, pointing toward the shed. "He's been hiding in our greenhouse for days, more, ever since Justine's arrival. He could have killed my mother." "I know," Elizabeth replied. "It's a shock." He turned toward the shed. "I want to look at him a last time, to make sure he's really dead. I've never seen a corpse before." "No, you mustn't. We should go inside. Come." Elizabeth took his hand to calm him. It was an old habit, one ingrained from their childhood. Instead of Victor tugging her hand in their old way, a quick squeeze of the fingers as though to say, "You are my friend and I am here with you," he released her hand. "Not yet. I want to speak to you first." How strangely Victor was behaving. "Not about the corpse, I hope." A deep rumble of thunder shuddered across the sky. "Something else. I've been a fool, Elizabeth." "Because you never noticed the soldier?" When Victor answered, his voice was low. "Something far more humiliating. Dr. Galvani made me realize how useless, no, despicable my studies have been." Another lightning flash. Elizabeth waited for him to continue. Victor's words rushed and tumbled like a broken dam. "I've been studying alchemy. I found some books. Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus, and Paracelsus. They've been the lords of my imagination for the past 2 years. I kept my studies a secret from my parents, from you, from Henry. Under the guidance of the alchemists, I searched for the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. All I considered was the glory I'd gain if I could banish disease and death. But after tonight, I'll quit those pursuits. I'll turn to something else. Mathematics, perhaps." With his confession, Victor smoothed his curls, drew a deep breath. He even yawned. Still, there was an oddness about his affect that troubled Elizabeth. She stole a glance at the shed, thinking of the corpse within. "We should go inside, Victor. It must be nearly dawn." "Not yet. Let's watch the storm from beneath the doorway first. Come." Elizabeth agreed, letting him lead her toward the maison de campagne. They stood hand in hand, their backs pressed against the door, as the elements stirred in their direction. Another swish of lightning, this one from the north. In the east, where the sun edged the horizon, rain lashed the sky until it lightened to the hue of a fading bruise. A deep rumbling rose from the core of the earth itself. "Look, Victor! The storm's nearly upon us." Together, they watched the storm's progress with curiosity and delight. Well, the curiosity was Elizabeth's, the delight Victor's. Thunder burst with frightful loudness from the heavens, but they were protected beneath the doorway. Safe. A deafening rain soaked the garden, a downpour. All of a sudden, a stream of fire issued from the old oak that stood about 20 yards from the house, the same one they'd found Justine beneath 2 weeks earlier. As soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak disappeared from sight. "No, don't go to it, Elizabeth," Victor warned. "We'll look in the morning. It's unsafe." Too late. She'd run toward the oak, not believing her eyes. A jolt, a shake. Elizabeth slammed against the wet soil, face up toward the heavens, rain splattering her body. Somehow a minuscule fraction of the force hitting the oak traveled through the soaked ground across the garden. Elizabeth shuddered as energy surged up her spine, through her hands and beyond her fingers, toward the sky. Then, just as suddenly as the electricity had risen, it was gone, leaving her flat-backed on the earth. Elizabeth sat up, woozy but untouched save for her rain-soaked body. "Victor?" Victor sank beside her, grasping her hand in his. Now he was drenched too. "I know. Such wonders," was all he said, his eyes gleaming. "Such marvels." Chapter 6. So soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it the next morning, we found the tree shattered in a singular manner. When Caroline visited the garden the following morning to pay the gravedigger, she found the oak tree gone. Instead of being split by lightning, it had been reduced to thin ribbons of wood. She'd never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. "Nature," Victor explained. "Electricity, like Dr. Galvani's demonstration." Beneath where the oak had stood, the Frankensteins found the pale, feathered remains of what had been an owl and a ruddy fox slinking away into the underbrush. To her surprise, Caroline watched Elizabeth kneel to paint the owl's remains in careful watercolor, using the kit Caroline had given her as a birthday present. Justine accompanied her ward, holding Elizabeth's brushes and paints for her. In time, new life would replace the oak tree. Before the arrival of summer, celadon-hued leaves would sprout from black earth made fertile with ash. After a complete turn of the sun's wheel, birds and squirrels returned to where the oak once stood in search of acorns and worms. Within 4 years' time, a thin sapling had set down roots to grow nearly as tall as Caroline. But none of the Frankensteins would witness this phenomenon, for they had abandoned their maison de campagne in Bellerive to return to Geneva. "It's so Victor can attend school. He's taken an interest in mathematics. Also, Elizabeth wanted to take art lessons," Caroline claimed when asked, though this wasn't the complete truth. Whenever she stepped beyond their maison de campagne, she couldn't stop recalling that night with Dr. Galvani and the dead soldier, those pamphlets with the twisting naked bodies, the shattered oak. No place was safe. Instead of Geneva, it was now Paris and the Netherlands that stormed with revolution. And so Caroline reluctantly told Alphonse they should return. Justine gladly accompanied the Frankensteins back to Geneva. Justine, who developed into the perfect servant in every way, loyal, discreet, hard-working, educated thanks to Victor and Henry Clerval, grateful. Even Sophie had been influenced by Justine's placid temperament and became amiable. The Frankenstein's middle son, Ernest, remained in the Alps for the sake of his lungs. Caroline visited as often as she could. She prayed he would soon grow healthy enough to return home. He was finally old enough to write them regularly, which brought her comfort. Once the Frankensteins were settled anew in their 3-story townhouse on the Rue des Granges, Alphonse increased his attendance at the Geneva Assembly. As a syndic, Alphonse had access to more information than most about the revolutions taking place outside Geneva. In Paris, armies of emaciated beggars were dying on the streets, and prisoners rotted in fetid cells for offences mild as smuggling salt. Citizens wore red hats signifying liberty for all, and tricolored cockades representing revolution. Hangings and starvation, riots and pamphlets. In the Netherlands, revolutionaries issued a declaration of independence. Liberty trees were set in town squares. At least in Geneva they had the protection of Swiss and French armies, though that hadn't stopped rebels from taking Alphonse hostage years earlier. All this served to make Caroline deeply anxious. By the time February of 1788 arrived, Alphonse assured her that since Geneva had already experienced one revolution, another wouldn't occur. Lightning couldn't strike twice in the same place. "Don't you agree, Madame Frankenstein?" "Madame?" Caroline came to with a start. She'd become lost in her thoughts, thinking of Alphonse and revolutions, all that had occurred in the 5 years since that Christmas soirée in Bellerive when the soldier died. She recalled where she was, a tea at Madame Manoir's, not far from her home in Geneva. Madame Manoir was the mother of Victor's favorite schoolmate, Louis. But to be fair, Caroline was often daydreaming these days, for she was again heavy with child. She still couldn't believe it, how blessed she felt. "My apologies. I was distracted by the sun," Caroline replied, cupping her ripe belly. It was exceptionally bright for a February morning, but that's not what had happened. The chaise Caroline had taken at Madame Manoir's insistence had proven too comfortable. You were saying, Madame? Madame Manoir repeated, "Surely you don't believe another revolution will happen in Geneva?" Caroline reached for her teacup as she considered her response. She shifted against the chaise to ease her back. Inside her womb, the baby mirrored her movement. With less than a month until her confinement, Caroline really shouldn't have been out in public. But Madame Manoir insisted on the visit because Elizabeth had painted her daughter's portrait. Justine accompanied them. Justine sat on the other side of the room, eyes trained on a copy of Paradise Lost while she awaited any needs Caroline might have. A good pair of stays helped disguise Justine's twisted spine. A good education helped her gain confidence, though she remained distinctive of appearance with her silvery hair and strange pale eyes. She was devoted to Caroline. The girl had even begun to speak with Caroline's soft lisp and dressed her hair in a similar looped chignon. It was all very gratifying. Caroline answered after a sip of tea, "My husband assures me all will be well." It had to be. "Monsieur Frankenstein is very wise," Madame Manoir concurred. "Indeed he is." Caroline offered a beatific smile. Backache or not, pregnancy agreed with her. Though she was older than other mothers, she felt reinvigorated at the age of 44. She'd never expected to conceive again, nor had Alphonse. Thus far, her pregnancy remained uncomplicated. Usually by this stage, the baby had stopped stirring, or she'd miscarried. Caroline offered her womb a gentle pat. "Stay with me. I love you already." "I assume you'll remain in Geneva for—" Madame Manoir's words came to a halt. It wouldn't do to mention Caroline's pregnancy. Caroline smiled again, though her back panged. "We'll remain in Geneva. It has advantages for my family." Alphonse was eager for her to be attended by his favourite doctor, which would be impossible if they returned to Bellerive. "Ah, there's Elizabeth at last." Elizabeth glided into the drawing-room, accompanied by Madame Manoir's son Louis and youngest daughter Genevieve, who was the same age as Elizabeth, now 18. "Behold," Elizabeth said, propping the tall watercolour of Genevieve on a chair. "Is it not like life?" Caroline struggled to her feet for a better look. She rushed with pleasure. Elizabeth really was talented. The portrait's composition reflected the changing times. Genevieve's hair was unpowdered and fell in natural curls over her shoulder without any puffs to raise it off her forehead. Her only ornament was a spray of wheat tucked over her ear, for Elizabeth had portrayed the young woman as the spirit of nature, like an ideal from Rousseau. Instead of hoop petticoats, Genevieve was depicted in a diaphanous shift-like gown collected beneath her breasts with a sky-blue ribbon. "Isn't it beautiful?" Genevieve asked, preening. "We must frame it, Mamma." "Indeed we must," her brother Louis concurred. "It helped to have such a lovely model," Elizabeth said, her cheeks rising with colour. "Indeed," Caroline said. The baby kicked her bladder, so active. Her back spasmed anew. "How much longer until I can leave?" "I appreciate your hospitality. We must celebrate," Madame Manoir interrupted, before Caroline could complete her farewell. As if anticipating Caroline's desires, Justine announced, "Forgive the interruption, but I recall Monsieur Frankenstein expects us home soon." A curtsy to Madame Manoir. "We so enjoyed our visit." "That was clever of you, Justine," Elizabeth said, taking Caroline's arm as they picked their way home along the icy pavement from Madame Manoir's. On the Place du Bourg de Fort, the shop windows were laced with frost. Caroline glanced at her reflection in one. Her mouth was a seam of discomfort. "Yes, thank you, Justine," Caroline said, wincing as she avoided a frozen puddle. "I couldn't think how to leave without being rude." Justine explained, "I noticed you were rubbing your back, Madame." "Aunt, you look weary. Take my arm," Elizabeth offered. "I should have insisted you stay home." Justine clutched Caroline's other arm. "Come, Madame, let's—" "Justine? Is that you?" Justine turned in the direction of the voice. colour drained from her already pale face. Madame Moritz, could it be? Caroline watched a skinny, grey-haired woman dressed in black loop her way across the square, her arms open wide, fingers spread as though to embrace all the world. Yes, it was Madame Moritz. Even if Justine's mother had never visited in the 5 years since Justine had joined the Frankensteins, Caroline hadn't forgotten her, especially since she'd continued sending Justine's pay to Madame Moritz. Caroline vaguely recalled the boy and the girl who'd accompanied Madame Moritz that day so long ago. She'd been heavy with child then, as Caroline was now. Today, Madame Moritz was alone. "Madame?" Caroline's tone was brusque. Madame Moritz ignored Caroline's greeting. Her eyes were only for her daughter. "How different you appear, Justine. So grown, so pretty. I nearly didn't recognise you at first. You're hunchback. Well, 'tis not as bad. Haven't you anything to say?" A nervous half-smile as Madame Moritz extended her arms anew. "Surely you can speak." "I bid you good day, Mother," Justine said, flinching at her mother's touch. "Excuse me." "How formal you are. I only wanted to say that if you ever wished to visit—" Justine avoided her mother's gaze. "I am kept quite busy by the Frankensteins." "Well, surely you're afforded a date," Caroline interrupted. "Justine is not at liberty, madame. You may visit her another time." "Would you like that, Justine?" Justine's lips remained tight. Within her tense jaw, Caroline sensed the girl's fear, anger, and, surprisingly, longing. After all, how could one not yearn for a mother's love? "I suppose not." Madame Moritz's mouth twisted in a strange grimace. "I suppose I did treat you unkindly at times." At times? Caroline's rage rose so bright she forgot about her throbbing back, the weight of the baby across her hips, the icy pavement. Caroline recalled the bruises, the scars, the burns she'd discovered on Justine's body that first morning, the lice crawling from her filthy, tangled hair. She was about to clutch Justine to protect her, but Elizabeth intervened. She whispered, "Let Justine speak for herself." Justine turned back slowly, reluctantly. Her jaw remained firm, though her eyes appeared glassy. "Adieu, madame." I did not expect that, Caroline thought. Justine took Caroline and Elizabeth's hands. "We must return home, Madame Frankenstein. Be careful. The ice is so slippery. Are you feeling any better?" Caroline nodded, her stomach roiled. Perhaps it was meeting Madame Moritz, the rich tea. The baby adjusted its position. Despite her discomfort, a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. How satisfying it had been to see Justine vanquish her mother. Perhaps it was petty of Caroline, but there it was. Anyway, Madame Moritz had 3 children at home. Let her soothe her guilt with them. "Nearly home," Elizabeth called out in an aggressively cheerful voice. Another step, 2 more. A long clench overtook Caroline's hips, one that lasted longer than the cry of a blue jay overhead. She heard a strange pop, one scarcely audible. A rush of water spewed onto the pavement from between Caroline's legs, soaking the hem of her gown. The puddle appeared tinged with scarlet against the ice. "She's having the baby," Elizabeth shouted when they reached home. "Uncle, where are you? Come!" Caroline's arms ached. Justine and Elizabeth nearly carried her the remainder of the way, clutching her beneath her shoulders. They helped her up the stairs to her bedchamber, each step a country to be traversed. More water leaked between her legs. The baby was squirming, kicking at her portal. "The doctor! We need him!" This was Justine. Caroline made out her strange pale eyes, the alarm within their depths. "I'll go." Victor's voice rose from downstairs. "Justine, my father is at the assembly. Can you fetch him?" In her room, Caroline was led to her bed. Justine set linens beneath her hips before rushing for Alphonse. Another contraction. Caroline stared up at her embroidered bed curtains, which Elizabeth had closed about her. The tapestries were swaying. How bright they were, their threads shimmering as though they were untangling. Her heart ticked in rhythm with the mantel clock. A pigeon cooing on the window ledge. Ice cracking on a tree limb. Another wave of pain. Had labour been so abrupt with Victor? With Ernest? Such violence! One moment her back ached, the next she was asunder in a sea of agony. A sea of water and blood and split flesh. The sea rose and pulled her down into its depths. Hours passed, judging by the shift of light. How long had it been since they'd returned from that tea at the Manoirs? Caroline couldn't recall. "I couldn't find the doctor," Victor said when he returned. She'd never heard him so panicked. "I asked the Clervals for help. Monsieur Clerval recommended one with an excellent reputation. Henry's gone to fetch him." He drew closer to her bed. His brown eyes were wild with fear. "Mother, what else can I do?" "Nothing, darling." With Victor's return, her room felt more crowded than ever. In one corner of her room, Justine perched on a chair, a bowl of cloths on her lap. Another corner, Sophie and Alphonse. Elizabeth leaned over Caroline, plaiting her hair, which had grown tangled on the pillows. She let out a long moan. "How soon can the doctor be here?" Justine asked, fear jangling her voice. Her eyelids were swollen. Caroline hadn't recalled her weeping before. "I don't know," Victor admitted. Another wave of pain. Caroline panted. "A midwife would be better," Sophie said, pacing. Caroline made out her bright red hair. "There's one in Shen. She attended my sister. She's a miracle worker. She even offers love poppets for those in need. I know a girl who got married after buying one." Justine shook her head. "Superstition. The church doesn't like that. I can seek another doctor, Monsieur Frankenstein." "Church doesn't matter," Sophie countered. "If someone could take me in the carriage, I'll show you where she is. Down the road to Shen. You can't miss her cottage. It's set beside a footbridge and has a bright green door." "No," Alphonse snapped, just as the bell jangled downstairs. "You'll remain here, and so will everyone else in this household in case we have need. Hopefully that's Henry with a doctor." Elizabeth rose for the door. "I'll get it." Caroline heard footsteps from the hall. An impatient hand turned the doorknob. Let it be the doctor. Suddenly her room emptied of family and servants, leaving her alone with a man she'd never seen before in her life. The doctor was tall, dark, with hands bearing roughened flesh, sprouted hairs. They appeared stained, spotted, muscular. Not dissimilar from Dr. Galvani's in a way. "Madame Frankenstein," he greeted in booming tones. "How long since labor commenced?" "I'm uncertain," Caroline managed to answer before another contraction arrived. "If you'll allow me, madame." He yanked her legs open, fished beneath her chemise. Some time later, Caroline opened her eyes with a start. How long had she been unaware? Since the doctor's arrival? Her room was unlit save for one candle. Night. The bells chiming from St. Peter's. How late? 1, 2, 3. She lost count. Her entire body ached. Her throat ached. Had she screamed? She must have. Someone daubed her face with a soft cloth dipped in water. Someone gentle. The water was scented with lavender. "Justine?" "No, it's me, Aunt. I sent Justine to bed. She'd been here with you for the past 4 hours." Elizabeth sat beside her bed, her touch gentle as she washed sweat from Caroline's brow. The stench of iron hung on the air. The shutters remained closed, the room dense with shadows. "The baby?" "Breach." Elizabeth's brow clouded. "The doctor turned it. You fainted during the worst of it. Baby is quite large, though it's early." She drew a shaky breath. "Things should go more easily now." Breach. Large. Easily. The words made the uncontrollable seem controlled. Caroline knew better. "Not much longer. Bring me my jewelry box, the one on the dresser." Elizabeth fetched a square wood box adorned with painted cherubs and bluebirds, a veritable garden of decoration. The jewelry box bore a small gold lock in the center of the lid. "The key is in a hidden compartment on the side, Elizabeth. Don't forget." Elizabeth unlocked the jewelry box, hands fumbling, for the tiny gold key was the width of a darning needle. Her eyes widened as she took in the box's contents. A ruby diadem, which Caroline wore on the rare occasions when the syndics gathered at the Hôtel de Ville, which was as close to a court as Geneva offered. Gold rings, strands of pearls, engraved bracelets. The box also contained relics from Caroline's life, lockets inscribed with initials, 2 fob chains formed from locks of hair. One was dark, the other white, her mother and her father. She'd held on to the one from her father reluctantly. "All these are to be yours. The emerald ring was for my engagement," Caroline said, gritting her teeth. An agonizing band tightened about her body. "Tell Victor." Elizabeth pulled out a letter that bore the seal of the Frankensteins. "What's this?" "For you when you marry. If I don't survive, open it then." "You mustn't say this, Aunt." A roll of pain. Caroline let out a long moan, one that shamed her, a scream. Her door opened. The doctor, he'd returned. "You must leave, mademoiselle," he said, clutching Elizabeth by her elbow. Once the door shut behind Elizabeth, Caroline gave way to the tide of pain breaking across her body. Soon after, she heard someone enter her room. Not the doctor, for he stood at her side. Had Elizabeth returned? A male voice, Victor's. He was speaking to the doctor, their conversation low. Scattered phrases leapt out. "She must survive. There should be a better way to bring forth life. A kinder way. It's unfair the female should suffer so." "Why is Victor here?" Caroline tried to say. "He must leave." She had no desire for her eldest son to witness her giving birth. No words rose from her throat, so he remained in that dank, bloody room as Caroline labored. She remembered nothing more, or did not want to.